relax, we're the good guys. Hello, my name is Will, and this is Exploding Helicopter, the podcast searching for a human connection to its audience. As our world grows increasingly reliant on virtual interactions mediated by technology, it seems a timely moment to wonder what the future of human experience will be. Ideas that may have once seemed purely speculative now feel strikingly relevant as advances in virtual reality, AI-generated personas, and online communication reshape the way we connect and interact. The film we're reviewing on this show seeks to explore this area and the potential consequences of technological dependence, and asks what happens when the lines between human and artificial identity begin to blur. So, we're looking at the 2009 film Surrogates. Given the themes of the film we're tackling, it seems entirely appropriate that my guest is a man I've never met in the real world and with whom my entire relationship is enabled by technology. It's my good friend Nick Rehak. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, Will, and when you say it like that, it sounds really sad. When you say it, I'm like, damn, he's kind of right.
Well, it was a very worrying experience watching this movie because I realised we are this movie, Nick.
Yeah, we really are. We just don't do it in the real world like the Surrogates would, which is... But could you imagine, though, if we had little robot avatars of ourselves, like meeting in person somewhere, like in a studio, sitting down and record?
Well, that is very much the future depicted in this film. But yeah, it's hard to think that that will come to pass. But you never know.
No, and at this point, I don't see why it couldn't. There's so many people that want to upload their consciousness to things, that want to take all of these medications and supplements to keep themselves looking young. I mean, if someone's able to kind of set themselves up in a chair, as they do in this film, right, as they do in The Matrix, or really any other kind of film where you're assuming kind of the character of somebody else, if there's a way to keep you in that chair, to keep you healthy and moving and no issues and stuff like that, like this is, I guarantee you they're already doing like runs and trials and tests of this kind of thing already, at least in the military, where you're sending like more of an on-foot kind of drone into an area to dispose of a bomb or something like that, and then once they kind of nail down that technology, it'll come to the masses. So I would not be shocked if within like 20 years we see stuff like this.
Well, there you go. Surrogates coming to a world near you. Well, I think we've set the stage for our review of Surrogates, so let's listen to a massive exposition dump disguised as a trailer.
Robotic human surrogates combine the durability of a machine with the grace and beauty of the human body. With most people living their lives through their surrogate selves, our world has become a safer place.
I think we may actually have a homicide here. First one in 15 years.
The public cannot be allowed to get the idea that using a surrogate can be fatal.
Especially if it's true.
Surreys have been blown to bits without the least bit of harm to their operators.
If it were possible, it would defeat the entire purpose of surrogacy.
You're lucky to be alive. Good thing you unplugged.
How long is it since you've been out without a surrogate?
Can't even remember.
Maggie, get offline. I think something's gonna happen.
What happens now? Now it's up to you.
Surrogates is a sci-fi action film set in a near-future world where humans live in isolation, interacting with society through robotic avatars called surrogates. These surrogates allow people to experience life without risk, as they are immune to harm while their operators remain safely at home. The story follows an FBI agent, played by Bruce Willis, who investigates a mysterious murder, the first in years, where both a surrogate and its human operator are killed. As Willis delves deeper, he uncovers a conspiracy involving the company that manufactures surrogates, a resistance movement led by a human figure known as the Prophet, and the technology's original creator. Forced to abandon his own surrogate, Bruce Willis must navigate the real world for the first time in years to unravel the mystery and prevent a catastrophic event. Surrogate stars the aforementioned Bruce Willis, Rada Mitchell, Ving Rhames, and James Cromwell, and Rosamund Pike. It's directed by Jonathan Mostow, who made Terminator 3, U-571, and Breakdown. The film cost $80 million, but only made $122 million worldwide, so would have been considered a flop. Critics' reviews were fairly middling, and in terms of the public, the film has a 2.7 out of 5 user rating on Letterboxd and a 6.3 user rating on IMDb. So with all of that out of the way, Nick, what did you make of Surrogates?
Surrogates is confusing at times, only because it introduces this world and you immediately forget that you're in that world until there's things to show you that, oh yeah, you're in that world, if that makes any sense at all. I think the film is a massive misfire in what it could have been, and what is a really interesting concept just gets watered down and diluted with just the most basic conspiracy story you've ever seen, and just the most just predictable dialogue. Not even like jazzed up for anything, just literally copy and pasted over and over again, and it becomes a disappointment. The performances are weird, but then you got to remember, like, they're not people, they're surrogates. So everyone's going to act differently. And I had to keep reminding myself, like, there's going to be a mix of surrogates and people in the film. And I don't want to say it's up to the viewer to figure out who's who, but there are times where it's like, is that just bad acting, or are they a surrogate? Which one is it? A lot of Dutch angles in the film, which I was kind of over after a while. Can we just get a tripod and put this thing on straight? But I wanted more out of this film. Truly, I don't know what you could explore differently. I don't know what story you would tell to really like get into that world and show like not just the glossy, fancy side of it, but that like kind of dirty and dingy and corrupted underbelly of it too. But I wanted so much more out of this film because there is such a great premise at hand.
Well, Nick, I completely agree with you. I think my overwhelming feeling that I'm left with after watching this film is one of frustration, because I agree with you. It's got a really interesting premise, and it nods to lots of interesting ideas that you can explore within this world, kind of the consequences of a world where actually human interaction is now done at a distance via these surrogates, these avatars that have been created for everyone. But at every opportunity, the film it never really goes into any of those ideas or themes in any depth. And I mean, overall, it's a fine film. It's watchable. It's got some interesting ideas in, and it's got some action in or whatever. It's not a bad movie, but I end up feeling more harshly towards this film because I just see the potential and the fact that it's largely squandered within it.
Oh, I would absolutely agree with that. And I had to keep telling myself, dial it back, Nick, because you know what's at stake already, you know what's going on, you know what it is. And it becomes one of those films like I just want to explore that world. I want to be in that world, because there are times with the very, very bad CGI and green screen in here that it feels like a early 2000s cutscene in a video game, where all of a sudden you're going to take the control of one of the characters, and now you are that person, and you're going through the game to figure out all this other stuff. And again, and I know we're just going to keep saying this again and again, like, we just want more out of this. We want to see, what does a restaurant look like? We want to see, what does an actual store look like? They kind of go into this kind of adult toy store, if you will, and they're looking at some things. But, like, what does the supermarket look like? What does a parts store for this place look like? Also, if this is in the United States, it specifically takes place in Boston and everything, where are the advertisements? Because we would be advertised to death in these things. Like, there's no way they wouldn't absolutely be everywhere all the time. And it looks fine at times, a little like, muted and washed out. But at the same time, it's got this weird, like, glossy look to it, which I found interesting. So there's, like, a lot of visual elements that are nice to look at times, but the bad CGI like immediately takes over. There's times where they're just having like just random conversation. They'll be sitting in an office somewhere and it just looks fake, like completely fake. And I don't know if they're trying to do that to add to the whole like surrogacy and it's, a fake you running around kind of thing or what, but it becomes off-putting. But again, I think if we were exploring different facets of the world, then it would make a little more sense. Yeah, they have the opening blurb that kind of breaks down some things, but I don't think it allows you to fully understand it because there's a moment when Bruce Willis's character loses his surrogate and he's running around out there in the world and he's overwhelmed by everything. And there's a part of me that's like, okay, so this is like VR, but if VR existed like in the real world, almost like a Ready Player One, but the character you take over is not in that world, it's in like the real world. And I think if there were better explanations to things, it would have been a little bit smoother, but at times it just feels clunky and by the numbers, and we're just like, what are we doing here, gang? And then I looked, this film had an $80 million budget. And I'm like, there's no way it had an $80 million budget. Like, there's no way in the world because it just looks cheap. And maybe it's a filmmaker thing where it's like, oh, yeah, it's supposed to because of surrogates and fake and baloney and all this stuff. And I'm just like, there's times where I'm just not buying it.
Well, in defense of the budget, I mean, maybe some of the things that they're doing in the film here in 2009 were more expensive to do back then than they are like today. That kind of sort of unnatural sort of plasticky sheen that are given to the actors when they are sort of performing as their surrogates. Now, maybe that was more sort of cutting edge back then, but I think we both have identified the fact that we're just sort of frustrated by the lack of depth in this film. And you mentioned the fact that you've got a very basic 101 conspiracy plot in this film, and I think that's an example of actually where there's a sort of frustrating lack of depth in this film, because you have the concept within the film that you have most of the world have adopted surrogates as the way in which they're going to interact with the world around them, but we have these renegades, these group of people who live on reservations where surrogates aren't allowed, and we don't really get much explanation as to what lies behind why have those people chosen to live on those reservations and to not enter the surrogate experience. We don't really get much explanation as to what lies behind that, and I think that then creates a problem as to, because we have this leader like Ving Rhames who's playing the prophet, who is anti-surrogate, and he's kind of preaching revolution against the rest of society. So okay, some people might not want to live their life, through an avatar, but is that really going to motivate them to want to overthrow the rest of the planet? I mean, because there's a throwaway line in the film which tells us like 98% of the world's population have chosen to live through their surrogates. So these are a real sort of minority of people. I mean, so they're totally out. They're totally outnumbered. They're totally outgunned in the sense of these surrogates are, like, certainly we see the military ones are imbued with like almost like superpowers. They can leap huge distances. They can run incredibly fast. So there's it's inconceivable that this human revolt is actually going to succeed. So it just raises a lot of questions, and given that is that tension lies behind the central conflict of the film, it feels like that I don't want the film to explain everything about this world to me, but it feels like that needs to be fleshed out more if this film's really going to work.
Exactly. Now, if it was a really unique storyline and something that was engaging, we'd be a little more forgiving, right? We would, in passing, say, I wish they would have explored that a little bit more, but they did this and that was really cool. We don't get that. We don't feel that way, like, at all about the movie. And it's just, and I mean, we're just going to keep saying it, but like, it becomes a disappointment too, because when we see that these characters are actually surrogates and there's people behind them, then our brains start going, okay, well, who's real and who's not? Who's really behind this and who isn't? And I think that takes us away from the story as well. And because the film is so bland, I think we just stick in our heads of trying to figure out like who's real, who's not real, or we're looking at the background and not really paying attention to the foreground. Whereas, like I just said, if the story was a little more unique and grabbing you and holding your attention, they could get away with a couple things.
I mean, I think the other major element of this film that isn't developed enough, that would actually have made it much stronger is the relationship between Bruce Willis and his wife with Rosamund Pike's character. I mean, that really should be the heart of the film. That idea that, you know, Bruce Willis is starting to become dissatisfied with the lack of real connection with his wife, and that is what motivates kind of key choices that he then makes throughout the film. But it just feels so much like there's some sort of script writing formula where, okay, these are the beats we've got to hit, and, you know, the film hits all those right beats, but none of them with any kind of, there's just not enough. I mean, this film's only 90 minutes long, so in many ways this film's actually very commendable in how much it squeezes into 90 minutes in terms of a conspiracy plot, like a high concept idea about how the world has been changed. And he does, you know, it kind of nods to many interesting things about how the world would become different if it was set up using this technology. But it just is, again, it's that point. There's a sort of frustrating lack of depth, and that just feels like this film would have benefited if it was a bit longer and we had a bit more time to develop the relationship, I think, between Bruce Willis and Rosamund Pike, and that would have given that film, ironically enough, or very aptly, given that we're talking about a film about robots, it would have given this film a bit of soul, Nick, a bit of heart.
It really would have, and I think you bring up a great point. Like, the relationship between Bruce Willis's character and Rosamund Pike's character, that's the only one I wanted to see after a while. I'm like, here we're getting to something real, and it allows us to see a different facet of that world in, like, the beautician side of things, and, like, polishing up your surrogate and making it, you know, however you want it to look, be it hair, nails, or what have you. But it just becomes diluted and becomes boring. And like you said, it's a 90-minute runtime. At times it feels longer. And at times it's like, all right, we've been on this part for long enough. Let's go on to something new, because we've explored that part time and time again. We can only say the same lines time and time again. We can only call someone a meatbag time and time again. And then, you know, when Prophet comes along and you start to hear them talking and everything, yes, he preaches revolution. Yes, he preaches that, you know, a change is coming and everything. But why? Like, what's really the central reason? Oh, we want people to feel again. Huh?
Yeah. Because it's not like the surrogate world is forcing anything on the people in the reservation. It's not like they're requiring them to do anything. It just seems they're completely like, fine, you want to live like that? It seems like they're completely indifferent to them. So again, you just don't like, why is the prophet like fomenting revolution? Why is anyone bothering to listen to him? Because, you know, they're just, as I say, the rest of the world seems largely indifferent to their existence.
Yeah, especially when their big reason for not wanting a surrogate is so that they can feel things. No one's saying you can't feel things when you're in a surrogate machine. So you're walking through a park and you don't necessarily feel the grass at your fingers. Yeah, but you're still at a park. You're still doing that kind of thing. Now, granted, I'm a little bit of a hypocrite in that sense, because I would rather be at a concert than have a surrogate standing at a concert for me. But it's still just like, if your only reason behind it is like feel, then that's different. Now, if you're like anti-technology, you're worried that the government's going to regulate it and take it over. If you're worried about the machines are going to turn like in iRobot or something like that. Like, if you're worried about the basic upheaval of technology a la Skynet, that's a bit of that. I can understand that. I can get behind that. Or, you know, surrogates are taking over jobs, but they're controlled by people. It's not like they're robots. It's not like it's an AI kind of thing. Like, they're just a placeholder for somebody, if you will. And honestly, like, it's kind of no different from like people that work from home currently. You know, you go into a meeting, you're going through Zoom. If you think about it, if you have a meeting, you're clicking in through Zoom or Teams or whatever you got, and you're just this face on the other side. Like, you're there in the meeting, but you're not there in the meeting. You know.
Yeah, and it just, I don't know. I mean, this is based on a graphic novel, and, you know, I've not read that. I don't know anything about it. And, you know, maybe some of these ideas are explored in a bit more depth in that form, because they've got the time and the space to do that. And many a film has had to compromise, you know, aspects of world building in order to be something that is of a length that is commercially viable in a cinema. But this film feels like they definitely had the opportunity, given it is just 90 minutes, it really feels like there was an opportunity to actually have some of these aspects a little bit more developed. And I think it would have worked a hell of a lot better. We've criticised some of the aspects of this film for the failure to really world build effectively and answer some questions that I think would have improved the film. But I don't want to just trash this whole thing, because I did enjoy this film. I mean, it certainly was no hardship to watch, and there were some things actually that I quite liked in this film in terms of the world building that we see here. There's some like amusing terminology within the film, as you've mentioned. You've alluded to the meatbag line, which is how somebody who is in their normal corporal self is referred to, and there are sort of some little I enjoyed there's a few little posters within the film that I enjoyed spotting. There was one for an extreme version of Monday Night American Football, which I enjoyed, because yes, if there are no sort of real world physical consequences for how American football is played, well then, yeah, what could it look like? What could it look like in the future? And yeah, this idea of I don't know what you'd call it. Like, I don't know, it's sort of like drug use or sort of artificially stimulating your surrogates. It was kind of referred to using those sort of pleasure tubes. That was called jacking within the film. We don't really get any detail on it, and we don't really need more detail on it. I guess it's just, but it was a nice little bit of world building, and that happens quite a lot within this film, and I appreciated those little touches being within the movie.
It is nice to see those. I do agree. I think the football poster was cool when they're doing the jacking in the apartment, or like I said, even when they go to that more like adult geared toy store, just kind of looking at like what you can buy and how you can adjust. Even the guy explaining like, oh, here's the basic form. It comes with touch and see, but if you want to smell or you want to do these other things, you got to pay extra for it, and we can, polymold your face. And it was kind of neat to get into that a little bit to see, how the world works. It's your base models, and then you build into like newer primo models and things like that. But again, it's just more of that, but I want more. But I want to see more of that. But I do agree with you in that it's more of the show and not tell that really, really works. So seeing them kind of passing that tube around and stuff, like, okay, it's interesting to see that, but part of me also wanted to see, how does it affect the user on the other end? Like, is it giving an overload of sensation? Like, what is the actual, like, what's the payoff behind it? But then again, I think it works better when you don't know, and you just see them kind of passing this around and doing this thing, and it just shows you, like, even though people have these surrogates, right? What are they doing? They're still going to work. They're still just doing, drugs in an apartment or something. They're still just walking around a city. No, you don't see people exploring. No one's going off to Everest. No one's plunging the deepest depths of the ocean. Like, people are just going through their day-to-day, and I think that adds to the dystopia of it, and kind of makes it a little depressing at times.
Yeah.
Even as the film, goes through and shows us these bright colors and all the options and things that are available, like, as a society, we're still choosing, like, the lowest common denominator, and I found that really interesting.
And there are little details in there. I mean, I'm just going to air this frustration. I mean, we really sort of this is turning into a real gripe fest here. But there's sort of the details within the film, which again, irritatingly not thought through. Which is, if you're spending your whole day like lying on a cot, operating your surrogate, I mean, your body is just going to like atrophy, isn't it? I mean, you're not going to be, your muscles are just going to slowly sort of weaken away. So, somebody like, Bruce Willis in this movie, it's not that he would have been overwhelmed by having to walk around in the real world for once in person. It's that he probably would have found it really difficult, because he just, like, when was the last time that he actually walked any distance? He'd be sort of exhausted after walking sort of the length of half a street or something.
Yeah, went out last time he saw the sun or anything like that.
Well, he's disturbingly tan for somebody who's presumably just spends most of his day inside, like lying in a darkened room, which is what we see his flat is depicted as. So some inconsistencies there. But let's let's talk about the ending of this film. And we see, and it's not really a spoiler here. I think we can all. This is, as Nick, as you said earlier, this is conspiracy 101. I think we can all guess where this film ends up. So all the surrogates sort of end up disabled. No one knows how to turn them back on. Nick, I wondered, what do you think happens next for the world? Do you think in this film, do you think human society finds a way to turn them back on, or do you think the world takes this moment as an opportunity for a reset?
I think the world slips into a depression because people are realizing, oh no, I have to do all these things again. Then there becomes a class-based system where those that have been living with surrogates feel better about themselves and that they're elitist, and they kind of take over control. And then there's someone within that world that used to be surrogates, stumbles upon something to rebuild the surrogates, and then it finally comes back. So I think it's just like anything else. It's just history repeats itself. It destroys, but then a newer, better version of it comes around, and they just all get back into it because they completely forget about what it was like before. They just go off of what it felt like at the time and the benefit that they got out of it for the most part. But I think eventually they do get back to the surrogates, albeit a little more regulated or a little more government. What's the word I'm looking for? Not intrusion, but the government would have a much greater say in it this time around.
Well, I mean, the government seems to have an awful lot of say in it as well, because there's this idea of sort of like almost like a Minority Report style police state where everyone's actions are being observed because they can, see everyone's surrogates' feeds. So there's, they're already kind of in a sort of highly regulated sort of government existence here. And again, I'm just repeating myself. Another aspect of this film,
but that's what's happening
properly.
now, though, right? Though, but that's what's happening now in society. People can view our actions anytime they want. Why? Because we've turned our phones into point of views, and we show people what we're doing all the time. You have these influencers and content creators; they're showing you their quote unquote lives and what they're doing all day long, and that's nothing but data to be collected by the government, to be collected by all these organizations that are developing AI. We're giving it all to them. Now, that is the conversation that needs to be had in this film. That's what the people should be rebelling against as far as like the anti-surrogates go. Like, we don't want people, it's an invasion of privacy, it's all this other stuff. That's the conversation that should be had and really like thought-provoking and pushing. But then when does it becomes difficult, because then it's like, what is surface level, what's too deep, what is like trying to be philosophical but coming flat and like not really nailing it like you could. Like, it just becomes this whole, I don't know, not Ouroboros where the snake's eating its tail, but it just becomes this really tricky line to walk. And I think the film does as good a job as it could, but I think oftentimes it's walking to the right of the line rather than on the line itself, or to the left of the line rather than on the line itself.
Well, on that depressing dystopian note, I think it's time we take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about the exploding helicopter action.
How many men upstairs? Let me rephrase that.
There's an exception to every rule.
I can take your badge right now for initiating an illegal investigation.
On the Pittsburgh police force,
Hardy, behind you!
his name is Tom Hardy.
Officer Hardy was not out of control.
I'm trying to solve a murder here!
Bruce Willis, Sarah Jessica Parker, Striking Distance. Rated R. At theaters September 17th.
We're back, and now we're looking at the exploding helicopter action. Willis is aboard a police helicopter as he hunts down the murderer. The killer is equipped with a special weapon that kills surrogates and their users. The villain fires the weapon at the police chopper, zapping the pilot. Without anyone at the controls, the helicopter, an Airbus AS350 Squirrel, spirals wildly towards the ground, clipping a building before crashing and exploding, although not before Bruce is miraculously thrown clear. Nick, what did you make of the exploding helicopter action?
It was a lot. I think it was really cool to take a look at, because it's a playful twist on a pilot getting shot or a missile hitting the helicopter. Instead, it's this kind of electric bolt, electric static shock. And we get a lot of action before it. It's not just it gets hit, boom, it explodes. Oh, no. This takes its time, and this, to me, is probably the highlight of the film. Not just because this is what this podcast is about, but it's just when's the last time we had like a nearly 2-minute helicopter just descent, right? The explosion that happens, and not only does it take forever to hit, once it hits, big fireball, big spins and crashes, but we go back and we actually see it in the background. We actually are on the ground with that helicopter. We're kind of in its last breaths and its death whistle, if you will. Like, we are not shying away from it. Do you know how exciting that is, Will? I'm sure it's got to be exciting for you. Anytime there's an exploding helicopter, what happens? Boom, it's off in the distance, and they go in the opposite direction and walk away. Not here. They go right to where it's exploded. They are right in the action, in the heat of it, not missing a beat, and upward and onward they go. Now, is most of it CGI, and it could have been, I want to see a real helicopter? Yeah, totally. But to see it hit some bricks and slide along into a market, there's a big fiery explosion, people are running and freaking out, and then just kind of see it in the background and just say it's a living tactile thing. You love to see it.
Well, I love that you love to see it, Nick. I did enjoy this exploding helicopter, but maybe not as much as you. I mean, I do agree that we do get to spend a lot of time with this particular sequence and with the sort of unfolding situation after the pilot is zapped by this gun. And the pilotless craft is spinning around in the sky. I love, Nick, it's a little detail, and I love it when it happens in the film. There's like a little alarm that's going off within the helicopter, that kind of generic like beeping alarm sound that we hear. I love helicopters being out of control and alarms going off in the cockpit. I love that. Any scene with that particular detail, I'm an absolute sucker for. And we get that here, and we get that for a nice amount of time. So I was really able to enjoy that bleeping alarm. And you enjoyed the explosion. I was a little bit frustrated by it. I felt that the explosion was a bit sort of obscured by these sort of piles of like it sort of crashes into a building site, and I felt it was a little bit obscured by some of the sort of rubble that was around at the time. Certainly a big fireball, but I would have just preferred some slightly different shots there so that I could fully absorb and enjoy that particular fireball. One thing I wanted to ask you about, Nick, do you think like later when Bruce Willis returns to the reservation, do you think that sort of cross that has been erected with like Bruce Willis's surrogate kind of nailed to it, and there's somebody scrawled like "Die Robo Pig" onto it. Do you think that that's part of the helicopter? It sort of looks like it might be part of the tail of the helicopter. Do you think? Did you notice that? Do you remember that? Do you think it was part of the helicopter?
I do think it is part of the helicopter, especially when I don't know what,
because it would make sense.
No, absolutely. There's the vertical part of the cross where it says "Die Robo Pig." The one side of it had like drill holes in it, as if it were to be attached to a different system to act as a blade, and they look kind of curved, and they just look designed for aerospace. Not aerospace isn't the word, but they're just designed for speed, for moving through the air. Aerodynamic, there it is. They're aerodynamically designed, so there's no way it wasn't part of the helicopter, and that's actually a fun little detail as well, in that it's remembering what happened, how it happened, why it happened, who it happened. Like it works on many layers.
Yeah, and I enjoyed the fact that the exploding helicopter wasn't forgotten. We get to see it again later. So okay, well, all told, the highlight of the movie for you, Nick. So I'm glad that this scene came through for you in an otherwise slightly underwhelming film.
It did feel good to have a win. And if the helicopter is the win for once, I'm all for it.
Okay, I think that just about wraps things up for this show. Nick, before you go, is there anything you've got going on that you'd like to plug?
Yeah, not really. No, I'm just kidding. You can find me over at rabbitholepodcasts.com. I'm on a couple of shows over there. Lyrical Innuendo, Play MST for me. Whatever is another one that I've been looped into, so there I am just hanging on to that. You could also check me and find me here, previous episodes of the fantastic Exploding Helicopter podcast.
As always, don't forget to check out the Exploding Helicopter website for reviews and information on how helicopters blow up in films. You can follow us on social media. We're on Blue Sky, Letterboxd, Facebook, and Instagram. We'll be back soon. But until then, what should people do, Nick?
Keep watching the skies for those exploding helicopters.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.